Welcome back to MediaScience MYTH BUSTING. I'm your host, Philip Lomax, and I'm joined by Dr. Dwayne Varan. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the power of print. As our audience knows, print has kind of diminished over time, at least in the perception of its effectiveness.
I think there's still one or two readers out there.
Indeed, indeed. When I was in Germany recently, I picked up a paper copy of the New York Times, and I felt quite proper reading it over breakfast. But Dwayne, as we've seen this shift in media buys to digital and connected television, what can we say about print in the 21st century?
Well, of course, print is still out there, and when you think about it in terms of impressions, it's still an impression that's available in the market. So we still should understand what effect it has, and particularly we need to understand that effect relative to digital so that we can properly account for it in our media plans. I think a lot of people now may choose to ignore print, thinking that, I don't need to worry about it. But there's a couple of things that we have to remember. One, media planning is all about reach, and print is still an important ingredient in terms of reach. But then there's the other thing which we're going to talk about today, which is really exploring what impact print has relative to digital. And so if it turns out that it's actually more effective than digital, that's a really important thing for us to know in our media planning.
So I recall during our study with the Premium Content Alliance in Australia, print was one of the mediums that we tested, and it was a pretty incredible study. I'd love for you to share a little bit more with our audience about the power of print as it relates to that particular study.
Oh my God, it was absolutely incredible. The Premium Content Alliance has all of the main Australian publishers in its little network, and they were all very committed to doing this study properly. The dialogue that we had with them is, what's the proper way of doing this study? And rather than have a study where we had fake newspapers, we all agreed that we would actually have these publishers print real copies of the newspaper with our test ads in it.
Wow.
And this was across a number of different cities, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide. So we tested across all these different markets. There were 42 different custom print runs. But it's not just the print run. They also had to deliver these newspapers to the specific respondents that we had selected for the studies.
Incredible.
So at midnight, when they run the print, the stories, when they print the newspaper, they would have to then print our custom version with our test ads embedded within it. And then at 3, 4 in the morning, they have to actually take these and they have to deliver them through the whole distribution mechanism to get these delivered to these specific households. So it was a huge enterprise. And remember, we're talking about over 5,000 respondents in the end. So this is a very large scale study where we could take these print ad exposures and then compare them to samples of people who were exposed to these in digital forms, including, for example, Facebook ads. And what we found, which was really quite shocking, particularly in terms of the magnitude of the effect, was just how much more powerful print was relative to digital. Here you're looking at a slide which is showing you the results when you compare the newspaper results to Facebook. And what you see is that it's delivering 300% of the impact for display ads, where you have static images, and 150% of the effect even against video ads. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of sad. I think that as an industry, we're probably discovering this a little bit late, but in actual fact, print is incredibly effective when you compare it really to digital formats, much more effective than digital.
And certainly the argument could be made that the reason why digital is invested in so much is because it's far easier to invest in digital, and it's difficult for us to understand the reach that we have with print. How would you go about tackling those types of objections, to media buyers today?
Well, and there's another thing which is probably the main difference, which is the behavioral data that we get back with digital.
Indeed.
We don't have that kind of data with print. And I think that's really a flaw of legacy media. The lack of measurability associated with what was media, that's a real problem. It doesn't mean that those legacy media were not delivering value. It was just if you can't measure it, then it doesn't exist. So a study like ours really helps provide a little bit of a proxy, if you will, for what the effect can be expected to be, but there is not that kind of granular campaign by campaign level data that you get in the print world.
So, the myth that print is irrelevant in the 21st century. Dr. Varan, what say you?
Busted. Print may not be as common as it once was, but when you're buying on CPMs, it's clearly delivering impact, superior impact. And so people should still be including print in their media diets.
Thank you to our audience for tuning in to another episode of Media Science Myth Busting. I'm Philip Lomax, this is Dr. Dwayne Varan, and we'll see you on our next episode.